Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next webinar in our Preparing for the 2026 San Francisco Annual Meeting series. Today is our third webinar on LGBTQ cultural districts and landscapes of progress. I'm pleased to be joined by this lovely slate of panelists and thank them for all their time and energy in preparing this wonderful webinar for you all. My name is Elin Thorland. I'm with the AAG. I can't wait to see you all in San Francisco. But until then, I'm going to turn it over to Robin Abad-Akobio, who will get us started here.
Thank you, Elin. Welcome, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you here, and thank you to Elin and Lisa and the team over at the American Association of Geographers for hosting this and being so thoughtful about preparing visitors to San Francisco with this series of webinars that precede the conference that's coming up here in March. So today's webinar, it has a very simple structure. I'll talk a little bit about the state and local context for this vehicle, this kind of statute called cultural districts that has given rise to the organizations that are going to be presenting today. After that, our three LGBTQ affiliated cultural districts here in San Francisco will present. We'll start with Tina Valentina Aguirre at the Castro Cultural District, then with Carlo Gomez Arteaga at the Transgender Cultural District, and then Bob Goldfarb with the Leather Cultural District will conclude. And then we'll move into some question and answer. So please feel free to use the Q&A function here in Zoom to pose questions throughout all of these presentations, and we'll take that last 20 minutes or so to address some of those and pose them to the panelists for responses. Again, my name is Robin Abad-Akobio. I'm really pleased to have organized this webinar. I'm with the Queer and Trans Geographies Specialties Group of the American Association of Geographers. I'm part of the cohort that is organizing activities here in the Bay Area for this year's annual convening. My other co-leads at the specialty group are Yanin Alexa Kramsky, Carrie Chennel, Prerna Subramarian, and Erica Sao. So big thanks to them as well for making sure that we have a full slate of activities here in San Francisco. And I also mentioned Elin Thorland earlier and her team over at AAG, so thank you. So our three incredible panelists today are incredible leaders locally here in San Francisco and, are leading or in some cases co-leading the organizations they'll be talking about today. Tina Valentina Aguirre is the executive director of the Castro LGBTQ Cultural District. They hold a BA in communication from Stanford University and has worked in nonprofit grant writing for decades, serving as chair of the board of directors of the GLBT Historical Society for 4 years. Tina has made documentaries, produced art festivals, and is published in a poetry anthology. There's so much more I can say about Tina, but I'll move on to saying a few words about Carlo. Carlo Gomez Arteaga is the co-executive director of the Transgender District here in San Francisco. He's an experienced organizer, advocate, fundraiser, and trainer with nearly 30 years of experience focused on youth and LGBTQIA equity and immigrant rights. So as co-executive director of the Transgender District, he supports the organization to create an urban environment that fosters the rich history, culture, legacy, and empowerment of transgender people and their deep roots in the southeastern Tenderloin neighborhood in San Francisco. Bob Goldfarb is the executive director of the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District. He's a San Francisco resident of 28 years with background in finance. The district works to strengthen and celebrate the city's leather organizations, nightlife, arts, and small businesses. He shepherded the district's founding legislation through City Hall. Importantly, cultural districts in San Francisco are established through legislative action by our Board of Supervisors. And Bob regularly works with legislators to support placemaking efforts and reduce regulatory barriers affecting the community. He's previously served as president of Folsom Street Events, the infamous Folsom Street Events, and Folsom Street Fair, producing recognized Up Your Alley and Folsom Street Fairs. So cultural districts in San Francisco are enabled by sort of two levels of statute, local and state. California state legislation AB 189 in 2015, and then a local ordinance 12618. Funding is also provided through a local proposition that was Proposition 8. San Francisco is unique in cities in California and indeed the country in that we are the city with currently the most legislated established cultural districts. There are at present a total of 10 in San Francisco, and critically, three of those, nearly a third, are organized and based around LGBTQIA affiliation or identity. So those are the three districts that of course are presenting today. So it's exceptional. San Francisco is exceptional for cities amongst the state, not only in terms of the number of cultural districts that have been established here to date, but also that so many of them are focused on our LGBTQIA community. Here's a slightly different look at of course, this is a geography conference. So, geography and maps and sort of spatial distribution is really important. You'll see the Castro LGBTQ cultural district sort of in the geographic center of San Francisco, extending across what we call the Castro neighborhood. The transgender district is in the sort of northeast of the map of San Francisco. You'll see it's outlined by a black border. And then to the south is the Leather LGBTQ cultural district. And this is a diagram produced by SF Planning in 2025. I mentioned that California is not the only state with a cultural district program in place. Indeed, there are 18 across the country. California was, I believe, the first, with San Francisco very much leading the charge within our state. It's important to recognize that statute and frameworks across different states, of course, vary in all of their provisions. Some provide tax incentives. I've noted those here. I think there are a total currently of 5 that through their state provisions, have some kind of tax incentive associated with being part of the district. In San Francisco, there are 3 sort of key goals in terms of the stated purposes of a cultural districts program, a civic cultural districts program for the entire city. The first is stabilization, preserving and promoting diverse communities, cultural assets, events, and way of life, strengthening through amplifying and supporting the community's cultural traditions and improve the quality of life for all members of the community within the district, and streamlining, so coordinating city support, information, partnerships, and resources. Each cultural district is also charged through local legislation with addressing these 6 focus areas and strategies. So I'm really excited to be turning over this presentation shortly to Tina Aire, who's going to describe how the cultural district, Castro Cultural District, is addressing these: tenant protections, land use, cultural competency, arts and culture, economic and workforce development, and cultural heritage and preservation. And as we know, LGBTQIA communities, amongst many others, are especially vulnerable to displacement, to social and family disconnection, to impediments to economic mobility and success, to fair and stable and affordable housing. So the charge that our 3 queer cultural districts lead, to me, seems especially important given the extra vulnerabilities that our LGBTQI communities and other intersections of oppression face. Before I turn it over to Tina, one last plug. If you are visiting San Francisco in March for AAG, we will be having our queer and trans specialty group annual happy hour gathering on Wednesday, the 18th from 6 to 8 in the Castro district at Ricky's, who are very excited to be hosting us. Ricky's is a queer-owned establishment here in the Castro. There are zero-proof options as well as food for orders. So with that, I will turn it over to Tina Aguirre, who will talk about the Castro Cultural District. Each presenter will have about 10 minutes before we turn it over for Q&A. So don't be shy about leaving Q&A questions in the Q&A function.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you to everybody for attending this webinar. I'm really excited, and I'll start out by sharing the Castro LGBTQ Cultural District website, which is listed on this slide, www.castrolgbtq.org, is a great place for attendees of this webinar and the conference to learn about our mission. And also, we have a publications page on our website. I'm going to quickly dispatch the idea that I'm going to cover all of the strategic areas of our CHESS report. The CHESS report is the Cultural History, Housing, and Economic Sustainability Strategies. It's an acronym for that. And it's a very long report, you guys. So I'm not gonna share everything from that. Our report, I don't know, it's more than 100 pages, and it does cover all the strategies. I will not cover those. Instead, what I'll share is I'll start by sharing a little bit about myself. I've lived in the Mission Castro area since 1987, and I've seen a lot of changes in the neighborhood since then. And what I want to share is me. Sorry, something keeps popping up on my screen here, so I'm gonna close that. What I'll share is our mission statement. The Castro LGBTQ Cultural District is committed to preserving, sustaining, and promoting the rich cultural legacy of the Castro and its significance to San Francisco's LGBTQ plus community and beyond. Our goals are to highlight the structures and sites important to our history, foster racial, ethnic, gender, and cultural diversity amongst residents and businesses, and create a safe, beautiful, and inclusive space for LGBTQ plus and allied communities to visit from around the world and call the Castro home. The Castro LGBTQ Cultural District is a fiscally sponsored project of the SF LGBT Community Center. Also, before I proceed, I want to do a little bit of a plug, and if people can see my screen, what you'll see is I'm holding up a booklet, and it's called The Castro. The Castro, the story of San Francisco's best known LGBTQ plus neighborhood by Gerard Koskovich and Jen Reck. It's $20. It's a booklet that we've just published in the last 9 months. It's available at Fabulosa Bookstore in the Castro. So when you come to visit the neighborhood, stop by and they'll have copies. You can also order them by emailing info@fabulosabooks.com. Again, that's info@fabulosabooks.com. And it's $20. Shipping is $6 within the US. Taxes $1.72 for Californians. Okay, that's the end of my plug there. What I'll also share is on our website, you can download a publication of our accomplishments from 2020 through 2024. And I'm gonna start with the origins of the neighborhood. I love this slide because you can see proof that the Castro has had queers since 1954. At least the photos are in here are from 1956. But what I could share is from our booklet that research unveiled that there's documentation, the earliest documentation of a queer party in the Castro that was organized by a gay Black man happened in 1954. So I'm happy to share that. And also that these photos on the left include Jose Sarria, who is a pivotal leader in the world, really, for queer and trans people. And in our booklet, what we share is that he lived in the Castro as a child, which really predates even, it's really kind of a coincidence, but also meant to be that Jose Sarria came to be a huge leader for us, and then is literally in these photos that are in the Castro as a drag queen with Maurice. Jerry, who's a drag queen in the area and a business owner. On the right-hand side, what you can see are that small businesses and bars started popping up in the 60s. And here are four early examples of the Missouri Mule, the Libra Cocktail Lounge, the Mistake, and the Mint. And of these, the Mint is actually still around, which is kind of crazy. And next slide, please. What you could see here are some photos actually of underrepresented queer and trans folks in the neighborhood. On the left-hand side is a picture by Crawford Barton of three women at the Castro Street Fair. And then on the right are pictures newly published, newly available to the public, of Sylvester performing as Billie Holiday in the Elephant Walk bar, circa 1975. And I shared this with you because I want it to be clear that though the Castro has been around for quite some time, there's actually been some tension around who gets centered, who gets put in charge of policies and decision making for the neighborhood. And the Castro LGBTQ Cultural District in particular centers underrepresented queer and trans folks. That's lesbians and queer women, transgender individuals, LGBTQ people of color. And I'm happy to show that we have always been here, as evidenced by these photos, and the work continues. Next slide, please. Of course, the AIDS pandemic decimated the communities in the 80s. It really did a number on the neighborhood. I got here in 1987, and it was really kind of a ghost town in some of the queer areas of San Francisco. The Haight, which is not, we don't have a queer district there, but there were many, many queer folks that lived in the neighborhood after the sexual revolution in the 60s. And there used to be the I-Beam tea dance on Haight Street. This is in the 70s and 80s. And when I got here in 87, I remember thinking, why is this tea dance so empty? There are only a few people here, and it's kind of sad. And it really was because by 1987 there were so many deaths because of AIDS that people were hunkering down, and it had literally changed the neighborhoods of the Haight, the Polk, the Tenderloin Supper Market, and Castro. On the left-hand side is a panel by Dwayne Kearns Puryear, where he writes his own epithet of his death, and there's a photo of the Names Project AIDS Memorial Quilt Workshop. It's a historic site in the Castro, and it's important to note that the Castro was centered in the response to AIDS in terms of protests and mobilizations and organizations. Organizations like the San Francisco AIDS Foundation started in the Castro. On the right-hand side is a photo of the Dyke March, and of the time, Queer Nation, ACT UP, the Dyke March, and Lesbian Avengers were fabulous responses to what was happening in our community. And in many ways was a resurgence of engagement on a civic level, in the streets, in organizing in the bars, in homes. It really was an important time for us to come together. And I especially love this photo because you could see the Dykes are letting everybody have it. And this is from 1994. Next slide, please. Here's our map. This is actually our old map. So what I'm happy to share is our districts are living entities. We are people who lead the districts. We're people who live, work, and love in each of the districts. And The districts, the creation of the maps has been something of a political endeavor for at least the Castro LGBTQ cultural district. This map is what was approved in 2019 when we were signed into existence via legislation on the city level. It does not include Dolores Park. Next slide, please. And what I could share is that just last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, there was the Board of Supervisors approved the expansion of our district map to include Dubose Triangle. I just want to share that the gentrification and displacement that the cultural districts counter really do look at how spaces in our neighborhoods are documented in terms of historic sites, what is being supported in terms of like small business grants, and how are tenants' rights and homeowners being protected in terms of displacement. In our case, it really is queer and trans people that we want to make sure can stay if they're in the Castro, and if they're not in the Castro, they can return if they were displaced. Or hopefully there's new housing where people can afford to move into the Castro. This expansion I'm excited about because Dubose Triangle, there's so many queer places and people in the neighborhood, and it's a teensy bit conservative compared to the rest of the Castro district map. And my goal is to bring some alignment into this. So stay tuned on that. Next slide, please. This is an example of how we change what is on the map. When you come to the Castro, we change the experience of what you see. I hope that when you come to San Francisco for this conference, that you can take a walk in the neighborhood, and what you can find is on 18th Street, 18th and Castro is the center of the Castro neighborhood in many ways. And half a block from that intersection, 18th and Castro, on 18th Street between Castro and Collingwood, there's a parking lot with a building next to it that has two of our murals that we've installed. One is by Serge Gay Jr. on the left. This represents really the only mural in the Castro that centers Black, lesbian, and trans women. Pat Norman, Honey Mahogany, Ms. Billy Cooper, Gwen Craig. And then on the right is our Living Lesbian Legends mural by Tanya Wisharath. Check out the murals in person if you can. And what I could share is these are now destinations for people visiting in the neighborhood. I'm really proud of that. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to quickly zoom through the rest of these because of time. We had small business grants for 4 years of our existence. We've distributed $156,000 from our funds. And on the left-hand side is one cohort. On the right-hand side is a photo of a check distribution ceremony. And that's Juanita Moore there next to me. You can go to the next slide. We do advocacy. In this case, we were marching as part of the Drag Up Fight Back March in 2023, where I was a speaker. That's Landa Lakes and Miso Horne next to me. And then on the right side is me and Stephen Torres. We did a lot of advocacy for the Castro Theater to keep it queer in terms of content and movies. Next slide, please. These are outdoor activations. On the left-hand side is a photo from our Pulse Memorial, where we commemorate the loss of 49 souls murdered at the Pulse nightclub in Florida. And we start by centering indigenous dancers to cleanse the space each year. These are some of those dancers. On the right-hand side is the Castro Street Fair, where we had a booth this last fall where we were promoting our booklet. Next slide, please. Here is a photo on the left of the Living Lesbian Legends painting series. If you see behind me, there's actually a poster of the paintings. This was turned into a mural. But it started out as a painting series at Queer Arts Featured, QAF. It's in the space that was originally Harvey Milk's camera store. It's an important place. I encourage you all to visit it when you come to town. On the right-hand side is a picture of our booklet. Next slide, please. A couple of upcoming art projects as I end my presentation. One is a mural on the People's March. Next slide. And one on trans mask, transgender men icons. I'm excited about both of these. I had to jump through some hoops to make them happen. So light a candle, y'all. All the pieces, all the stars need to align for these murals. And then there's an upcoming art project, Conjuring Power, Roots and Futures of Queer and Trans Movements at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, Friday, March 13th. Please come to our art show. It's going to be great. It's a group art show. What you can see on the left-hand side is art from Esther Hernandez, and on the top right is Serge Gay Jr.'s new large-scale painting. It's going to be awesome. Please attend. Next slide. That concludes my presentation, and I appreciate everybody who is here, and please share questions. Next up, we have Carlos Gomez Artiaga, my fabulous peer at the Sibling Transgender District. He's the co-executive director. Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Robin and Bob, and the attendees of the upcoming national meeting. Welcome to the Bay Area. Much like Tina, I came here from Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago, but I came here in my early 20s, back in the late or middle 90s. And the neighborhood I landed on is the neighborhood I now co-direct with my fabulous co-executive director, who right now is hosting our third annual transgender and gender expansive health and wellness fair at the library, centering a talk around ballroom dance and the safety and creativity and culture that has come out of those scenes. And I think the Advocate's going to do a spread on us. So really excited to have you all come to our city to share in the vast history that we have here. And next slide, please. The Transgender District, I'm just going to start off with just a basic overview. It was founded by 3 Black women, and they are Honey McMahogany, if you see all the way to your left, Aria Saeed in the middle, and Miss Janetta Johnson. Were instrumental in starting the district. I'll talk a little bit more about what that entailed. But the district, in a sense, is the first legalized transgender district in the world. It's originally named after the Compton Cafeteria's uprisings that happened in the summer of 1966. This year will be the 60th anniversary of that riot. And I encourage you, if you are in town, I'm putting in the chat our website, but I'm also putting in the chat, there is a wonderful immersive play that I encourage folks to go. They've had a little bit of low attendance at the beginning of the year, but last year it debuted, and it's an immersive play that speaks to the history of how our district started. And basically, it was at a much like many of these neighborhoods have like places of congregation, places where our communities have gone to live their life, to share, to experience, to cry, to laugh. And Compton's Cafeteria was one of those places, late night places that people can go to refuge, to converse. And in those scenes, if you go to the play, you'll see that there was a lot of friction at times. And in one of those instances, whether it was police harassment or harassment of the attendees or the patrons of that cafeteria, it came to a head that summer of '66, where one of the trans women, drag queens that was there, flung a coffee at a police officer that was harassing her. And that started and sparked one of the first uprisings in an urban center, following that of Los Angeles, actually. There was one in Los Angeles as well. And so I invite people to go to that play if you're in town, if you can catch it. It's a wonderful experience of what it was like back, and they basically recreated the cafeteria in a location in the broader district of the Tenderloin. The Tenderloin is a broader district, and I'll talk about that when we review the map. But in essence, our mission is really to create an urban environment that fosters this rich history. It collectivizes it, it spreads it. It also speaks to culture and the legacy and the empowerment of transgender people within our neighborhood here in the Southeast Tenderloin. Our vision is really to help stabilize and economically empower our community. Next slide, please. So how did it start? Back in kind of the 2015s, 2010s, we were organizing in community to make sure that parts of the Tenderloin, so not the Tenderloin as a whole, but parts of the Tenderloin were really recognized for the historical content, the historical markers that came into our existence. And so for the Compton Cafeteria riots, the historical marker was one of the main pools, the main areas of which we today take people on walking tours on. And you'll see there in the picture is some of the folks that founded the district at the corner of Turk and Taylor, which is now, unfortunately, a Geo group run building, post-incarceration building where people come out and come back into life outside of prison. And so the corner of that building is where the Compton Cafeterias was. Back in the mid 2010s, folks came organized with Honey Mahogany, who is one of the co-owners of the Stud in the Leather District. Arya Saeed, who was working in many different nonprofits at the time, supporting our trans sisters and trans community as a whole. And then Janetta Johnson, who also is a migrant to the city, who came to find freedom, to find access here, like so many people continue to this day to come into our city, refugees of discrimination from across different parts of the US. And so the district really is a coalition it took to get this marker and this designation. Next slide, please. If you see, our district is one of the smallest districts. If you looked at the map that Robin had showed earlier, you see a little sliver, and that's our district. Our district is cornered on the north side, Ellis Street, and it extends down through Market on 6th Street, where we have some crossover with our sister cultural district, the Soma Filipinas Cultural District there, and some of the historical buildings there that have been part of a long history of workers, of organizers in that 6th Street corridor, if you see it coming down. Next slide, please. As Robin mentioned before, many of our mandates are similar as to our other cultural districts in terms of promoting arts and culture in our community, the cultural competence and cultural, I would say, responsibility to our community, and then cultural, historical kind of preservation and heritage, right? So making sure that these key areas of the city, buildings, corners, sites are preserved and that the history is documented. Another part of the work that we do is this economic and workforce development. 1 in 3 transgender individuals experience workplace discrimination. And so we want to empower our people to create economies of their own to sustain and to be able to thrive. Placemaking and land use is another huge part of our work, and I'll talk more about that as the slides progress. And another huge and additional aspect of our work is our trans empowerment work. Next slide, please. So we have our 7th mandate. I'll get a little bit deeper into our 7th mandate. Really, it's to help our community stabilize. It's to help our community in terms of healing, and it's to help our community thrive. And so what does that look like? That looks like for stabilization, we offer name and gender change clinics, passport support. Name and gender change clinics are essential in making sure that people's documents are aligned. Many times people come from different parts of the world, if not different states in the United States here, and we help them. We help them secure those documents so that makes housing, workplace, access to health, much easier to be able to have documentation, right? Our other work that we do is stabilizing folks in their homes. The district as a whole right now is about 1,000+ people who live that are transgender in our district. And what we know is that I would say the district as a whole has about 10,000. About 60% are foreign born or US born rather. And then there's a breakdown in terms of immigrant communities. It's one of the largest port communities here in San Francisco, and about 96% of the residents in our district are renters. For our community, rent stabilization is a huge deal. The last point and count in terms of homelessness in our district doubled from 2022 to 2024. And it's above 700 folks that are unhoused at one time. There's another point and count of the homeless that's happening or unhoused neighbors that's happening in January, and we hope those figures go up. But what we know is that we've had a lot of people also migrate to our city and our state, fleeing a lot of the anti-trans legislation and restrictions that we're seeing in other parts of the country. Another big part of our work is our wellness work. And so whether that's Know Your Rights, self-defense classes, sharing resources regarding tenant rights or immigration rights, as all these intersect with our community, making sure our community has the most updated information and access to a cadre of support systems and organizations and individuals that are able to lend that their expertise. And we do this through a myriad of ways. And a lot of the work we do is in partnership and in collaboration with our allied organizations throughout the district and throughout the city. The third aspect of our work within our seventh mandate is really to help stabilize the community with work, with sustainability. And so we help through our social justice fellows, in which is a program that people who maybe work the entertainment or sex economies transition into something else. And we create pathways and create stipends for folks to have that transition page space to be able to then really find a new way of making a living that is sustainable for them at their given point in time. And then the other aspect of the work we do is support our trans and gender expansive entrepreneurs through creations of small businesses. We've helped launch about 55 businesses and also support existing businesses that have been here. So if you are in either the financial district or in our district, please come and visit our districts. There is a really lovely trans woman who owns a Thai restaurant in the financial district, Hedi Thai. And so I would recommend that you come and not only visit the district, but the businesses that make up our great city. Next slide, please. Great. And so one of the huge parts of our empowerment is to really recognize our history, right? To acknowledge our history. Our activist and former staff member, Juniper Peraza, really launched this through the recognition through the city and county of San Francisco of Transgender History Month. So we celebrate in August, the month of the uprising here for the Compton cafeteria riots, our history here, our month. And we do this by showcasing both art and culture, historical talks, walking tours, and a myriad of different ways in which people interface with the district and with our community. We host this in August, and now the state of California, it's expanded to the state of California, is now recognized as a month of history in the state. And we're really proud of this work. I also want to highlight that we were recently awarded and will be announcing a Carnegie Mellon Foundation 3-year grant to help document some of the forgotten histories, especially histories of Brown and Black trans individuals in our district. And we will be working with notable historians, trans historians, Andrea Horn and Dr. Megan Reuter, who will be working with us to enhance and develop this walking tour. It'll be self-guided as well as creating economic opportunities for our trans leaders, whether that's elders or youth, to lead these tours and help them also have a way to sustain themselves through this type of historical interface and community interface. Next slide, please. One of the big projects that we have that we're finishing up is the Safer Taylor Street project, in which we're working in conjunction with some of the city agencies And we have been working on a series of plaques. And this is really the work of my predecessor, Arya Saeed, who was also one of the founding members of the district. And it really highlights some of the historical contributions, both national historical significance, but also local historical significance of our, we have about 6 individuals that we're recognizing: Marsha P. Johnson, Wilmer Little Axe Bornox, Sir Lady Java, who just passed away last year, and I really hope that her documentary comes out soon. Mary Jones, who was from Oxnard, California, and was instrumental in really moving as a huge entrepreneur in that area, amongst others. So we are really excited for this to launch, and we'll be groundbreaking and having a ribbon cutting ceremony soon. And we're also, much like the Castro District, starting our mural tour, and we'll be launching on Golden Gate Avenue, our first mural in the district that is a permanent mural in the district with one of our local businesses. And then I will just put a couple of things in the chat for folks: our annual report last year, kind of highlighting some of the impact we've had, and also Dr. Megan Reuter's book on the cultural district for the Tenderloin that highlights some of the pictures going back to the 1920s where our history starts. And now I'll introduce my colleague and my ED at the Leather District, who will be talking about their work, Bob Goldfarb, sorry.
There we go. Hi, I am Bob Goldfarb, 28-year resident of San Francisco, and currently the executive director of the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District. Next slide, please. We are the Leather District, and this is what happens to city officials who delay our permits. Next slide, please. We're located in San Francisco's South of Market area. Originally, our venues, bars, and other venues relocated to SoMa in the late 50s, early 60s, because the city essentially pushed the LGBTQ and leather establishments off of the Embarcadero. The first one was a Toolbox, which was located there in 1962. It is now a Whole Foods. And the catalyst for our formation more recently has been the rising rents, the loss of our venues, the development pressure, and the erasure of our spaces. The Folsom Street Fair, which some of you may be familiar with, was originally founded as a protest against redevelopment. The area around Moscone Center was redeveloped, displacing more than 7,000 individuals and hundreds of local businesses. And similar redevelopment was planned farther down into the area where we're located. And so the Folsom Street Fair essentially stopped that tide. And so the Leather District was established not just to commemorate, but to stabilize the community. Next slide, please. Our origin story: the first attempt to form the district was in 2008. We didn't have adequate legislative support, and it failed. In 2017, grassroots meetings were established again, and our resolution forming the district came to be in 2018, 2 weeks before the city established their cultural district program, which we were then folded into. And as mentioned previously, the same year, Proposition E passed, carving out funding for the cultural districts from the hotel tax fund. The district itself, our organization, we incorporated in 2019, and after the city had established our geography through legislation. Next slide, please. Here's a map of the district. We are the areas in blue. Uh, the um, the boundaries reflected our cultural density. And you can see the hearts are where there are current leather and LGBTQ businesses in the area. The area to the right, you'll see the white square in the upper right of the map. There were leather and LGBTQ businesses in that area and farther down to the right towards 4th Street. However, in deference to the Filipino community, which there is a school on 7th Street, they asked us to stop the district at that point so that our nightlife interests would not conflict with some of the family interests in that area. And so, as you can see, the map is really a political geography, and it is not neutral, if you will. Next slide, please. And Soma, the area that we're in, is really a spatial ecosystem. In 1980, there were 44 leather and LGBTQ bars, bathhouses, and clubs in the area. And they were attracted to Soma because of the industrial zoning. The the area had a number of vacant buildings. It had lower rents than other parts of the city. And the industrial nature of some of these spaces led to having spaces large enough for the bars, the clubs, the bathhouses, etc., so that they would have adequate space to operate. The neighborhood attracted the Toolbox, which I mentioned previously in 1962, and the Toolbox was featured in the late 60s in Life magazine as it was being torn down. The Folsom Street was so dense with leather venues that in the leather community it was called the Miracle Mile. And there were lots of motorcycle clubs as well located in the area, usually using the bars as home venues, if you will. Next slide, please. If you could go back one slide, please. Thank you. Revisiting the map, the geography here is really interwoven. The only physical boundary on our map are the yellow lines which represent the elevated freeway. Everything else is flat. And there are no purely residential or commercial districts or nightlife districts. Everything is interleaved. There is commercial, residential, nightlife. They're all adjacent to each other, and very often the bars and clubs have residential spaces above them. And so what that means is that our community needs are layered, they're not spatially isolated. So stabilization really requires protecting the coexistence, not carving out new areas. Next slide, please. And who's here? Here we have a picture, one of the bars. We're on the ground floor, and you can see that there are residential units above. And we have owners, people who own their own homes. We have renters. We have supportive housing. In commercial areas, we have auto repair, self-storage, offices. We have restaurants, bars, event venues, wine bars. And we, like Japantown, are a commuter district. People come here for the nightlife. They come here for the shopping, the restaurants, but the majority of our constituents do not actually live in the district. Next slide, please. We've talked about core mandates with the other districts. There are 32 strategies in our CHESS report. One of them is elevating the businesses, which are really the lifeblood of the district. The bars, the shopping, these sorts of things. These are the leather and LGBTQ businesses. And here's a picture from our entrepreneur training program. Next slide, please. And we support them through things like our Kinky Holiday Market, where we give them a chance to vend and reach out to the public. Next slide, please. Another core mandate is outdoor activation. We do walking tours, which are pictured here. We also have an event called Leather Walk. If you could, next slide, please. Pictured here, it's an annual walk. It's a march for visibility. We got several hundred people. We go from venue to venue in Soma, and each of the venues has something special going on that day. Next slide, please. Part of our activation is creating our geography and our boundaries. As you can see here, we have a program that has installed custom street signs demarking the areas of the district. On the right-hand side, you can see we also have pole banners on the light poles. Next slide, please. We have Leather Pride flag themed crosswalks, more of which will be installed later this year on Folsom Street. We have a sidewalk plaque program you can see in the middle photo. And on the far right, we also have a program to install Leather Pride flags on the light poles. Next slide. And thank you very much. And I will turn it back to Robin.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob, Carlo, and Tina, for sharing so much about the broad range of activities that each cultural district is undertaking. I heard themes of coexistence, fluidity. There are other communities and folks of other identities and who face other hardships and challenges that exist alongside us. And so I get a strong sense of coalition and shared purpose, not only for our LGBTQ identified folks, but everyone else that lives amongst us and who we care about and who we take care of and takes care of us. There are also themes of that these geographies aren't neutral, right? And geographies never are. They're inherently imbued with a lot of meaning, significance by those who sort of claim them. So we've just got about 6 minutes left to wrap up. We'll do some question and answer. Pertinent to that last observation about neutrality, Mateus de Santos Cabral asks, how are cultural districts delimited? And I take this question to mean sort of geographies. Does this delimitation produce effects such as gentrification or even ghettoization, almost resembling segregation? If so, how do you seek to address and mitigate these issues? I will say that before I turn it over to our panelists to perhaps take a crack at this question, that these geographies are legislated. District boundaries in San Francisco are explicit, and as Tina described, they also evolve over time. So the electorate, the community, participates. Not just LGBTQ identified persons in the district, but the entirety of the community participate in legislating and redrawing these boundaries over time. So turning it over to my panelists, any thoughts about interactions with dynamics of gentrification, ghettoization, or other kinds of displacement? Please feel free to jump in, and let's try and do maybe 2 minutes on this before we jump to the next question.
I would say that just for me, one of the big issues I would see is just the displacement and dispossession of communities. And so the way I see cultural districts is as a way to thwart that, to make sure that our businesses, that our longstanding businesses stay viable, given all the changes that happen. And we have an example here in this area of town, the mid-market area. We're seeing huge redevelopment, but for us, we need to make sure that in that redevelopment, things are aligning with our community, that allows for our community to stay housed and to stay thriving. And so for us, that means that we need to have fees around and access to affordable housing, to access to green spaces, and things of that sort. And so for us, it's very pivotal. Our activism and our advocacy within City Hall is really around access to housing and making sure that our community its support systems are present, whether that's access to healthcare, whether that's access to a living wage, that sort of thing. I'm a big proponent of David Harvey's right to the city, and so that's the lens that I kind of operate on.
Thank you, Carlo. Tina, Bob, any thoughts on interactions with dynamics of gentrification, displacement, causalities in either direction? I would argue that our cultural district efforts are anti-gentrification in a way, but I don't know if you'd agree with me.
I certainly would. However, due to state laws, there is going to be a tsunami of gentrification and a tidal wave of new development in all of our areas. The state has removed local control. So I think that ghettoization is certainly not going to be a problem. And I think it's more the reverse, that we're really trying to prevent displacement.
I'll go ahead, Tina.
I'll just say yes and see if there's another question, maybe. Since we're short on time.
It's a big question, and we know that the leaders here on this call, as well as all of the geographers tuning in, are very preoccupied with this question. So we could talk about it for days. Okay, so on to the last question by Maxime Bulanov. I will say that we formally were meant to end at noon, but I know that panelists and myself and AAG had sort of scheduled to stay, they're 5 or 10 minutes for those who want to stay a little bit more and get into discussion, because I think we'll definitely bleed over the noon hour. So Maxime Bulanov is from Indiana University, PhD student in American Studies and Anthropology. He's noticed that local cultural districts focus largely on arts and commerce. So looking at SF, he's curious about whether or not the genealogy of the districts. Does the city's policy framework create a, quote, cultural district concept as a tool first, or was it a formal response to decades of identity-based nonprofit advocacy that demanded recognition and placekeeping? And so I'll also take a crack at this and say that part of San Francisco being a vanguard in many respects, in terms of political activism, social service provision, mutual aid, is very much part of the formation of cultural districts locally and in the state. So I think it's pretty irrefutable that the grassroots community organizing, especially that pre-existed in LGBTQIA communities, propelled the city's creation of a cultural districts program, and in turn, had impacts on the way that the state was contemplating and eventually also furnished state statute for that, right? So once again, LGBTQIA communities are at the vanguard and are at the very, very front of innovating policy instruments, all kinds of different strategies for, again, addressing stabilization, safe and secure housing, safe and secure communities, et cetera. So we do have one more question after this, but I'm just going to turn it over to my co-panelists to see what do you think in terms of Max's question? Was it a response? How did it come about?
I'll jump in first this time. It was a response. And it really goes back to, in some ways, Japantown's work. Japantown's work, they did a chess report a long time ago. They've been in existence for a couple of decades, actually. There was a task force that was necessitated by the huge displacement that was done by the city of San Francisco in terms of Western Addition, the Fillmore, and Japantown. It's truly horrible, and it's a great example of how racism and colonialism can play out when there are no people of color, there are no queer and trans folks in the policy conversations, or that the ones that are in those conversations are assimilationists. The cultural districts do not represent assimilationism. So as a whole, I'd say definitely we are anti-displacement and anti-gentrification. And each of us have been, each of our districts have experienced attrition and displacement of people because of the prices that how expensive San Francisco is and the ridiculous real estate market and the tech booms. We are very tied as a city to super rich people who do not interact with people of color and queer and trans folks in general, and do not and are eager to displace us. So yeah, I want to acknowledge Japantown. I also acknowledge the American Indian Cultural District is clear to share that all of San Francisco is unceded land. And regardless of the chronology of how the Cultural Districts program was brought into existence, those two communities, American Indian Cultural District, American Indians, and Japantown in particular, they're sort of on the forefront of our history.
Thank you for calling that out, Tina, that the Japantown Cultural District was of the very first to really be thinking about displacement and relating that to potential policy and regulatory frameworks. Very powerful. I've put the link to the Japantown chess report in the chat for others to be able to look at. Well, Bob, Carlo, anything else to add before we wrap up?
I mean, I would just echo that it's definitely like the fight against dispossession. You know, many of us had to, in the histories, had to form broad coalitions to get these districts approved and mobilize hundreds of community members to help in that process. So, and part of it is ownership of community members in the districts, right? How they see themselves reflected in the district. And that's why the chess process is so important for us, because it really shapes help our strategies through focus groups, through surveys of our community members, our participants, but then the broader community as a whole, our allied communities as a whole, and our sister organizations in the movement. So at least for us, I know that that's been a huge part. And that's why we added a seventh piece in terms of our empowerment and building power within our district of our most vulnerable.
I have nothing to add.
Well, with that, I just want to thank again our incredible panelists, Tina Valentina Aguirre, Carlo Gomez Arteaga, and Bob Goldfarb, and our hosts, Elin Thorland, and the team over at the AAG. We're so excited to have those of you who are listening today and coming to San Francisco in March to have you here. Please don't forget, happy hour drinks March 18th, 6 to 8 p.m. At Ricky's at 2223 Market Street. And with that, I think we'll close. We will be following up with emails to all attendees and registrants with the links that were in today's chat, as well as a link to a recording of today's session. I'll pass it over to you.